Fellow tennis nerds, I hope you are well. Here's another pro player racket update. We'll get into some more nerdy stuff like balance points and so on further on in the video. But let's start with, I think, what you're most excited about, some pro player updates. It's not going to be as jam-packed as maybe previous episodes, but we have made some observations. Thanks to you guys on Instagram and other media who send these over. I really appreciate it. It's always fun to talk about these things, and I'm happy to see that there are plenty of tennis nerds who like this stuff around the world. If you want to subscribe, please do that too. We can start with a Finnish player, Otto Virtanen, has switched from his blade to a Wilson Python, and the new Wilson spin racket. Still no information when this can come out. We have Korda, we have Kachanov, we have so many players playing this one. Emilio Nava, they seem to have done a good job here. I've tested this racket in 2 layups, and I do like it. It's a bit less explosive than the Arrow, but a bit more controlled towards the blade. So somewhere in between there, which I think suits many players. And for the pros, it's been available in 1820, Kachanov, for example, or 1620 Korda. So interesting racket. We're very curious to try it in retail edition when that's ready. All brands now are getting fired up with their spin rackets. That's what we're seeing, because many pros are going to spin rackets, but not all of them. And we'll get to that. Last year, I was at the Swedish Open in Båstad in Sweden, and Henrik and I, we noted that Ugo Carabelli from Argentina has a good game, very good game, a fun guy to watch, works hard, and he plays with the PT57A, really high swing weight, like 361, 27.5 inches. So that's what he used to play, but we noted in the video there that it didn't make so much sense. He has to work so hard with this 95 square inch head size 1820 pattern to generate anything on the ball, and it would make sense for him to consider maybe an Arrow or at least something more powerful.
Watch real grinders like Carabelli, who's also such a fighter, physically ultra fit, running everything down, plays like a PT57A, 95 square inch 1820, can still generate some, not like the biggest shot like Cerundolo with his 370 swing weight strong, but big hitting and fun to watch.
And I've heard that he's actually been testing a bunch of rackets to see what could be his next change, and he's made up his mind, and it's a Yonex Percept 97D, similar to Luciano Darderi. And this D model seems to be quite popular. It's the dense pattern model 1820, so he's still 1820 control racket, but isometric head shape opens up the sweet spot a bit. It's a 97 instead of a 95. And he's reduced the swing weight quite a bit from what I've heard. I need to verify this, but quite a lot lower swing weight at 318 grams though, so similar to a Percept 97D retail edition, 31.5 centimeter balance. Those are the specs. You have them on the screen. Interesting switch. One guy on Instagram noted that he did play the singles match at the Australian Open with the Prestige PT57A, and then moved on to the Percept 97D for doubles with Echeverry. And we will see what happens. Maybe it's not 100% confirmed switch yet. We're seeing this all the time, that pro players, they find something new and they really like it, but it could be the honeymoon period. You have the best week of your life, you play really amazing tennis, and then you change surface, you change opponent, you change balls, you change everything, right? That's what you do as a tennis player. You keep adjusting to ever-changing conditions, and the best players at adjusting usually are the best players, right? When you're adjusting or to a new condition or a new surface, slower courts, slower balls, then maybe the racket doesn't feel quite as nice anymore, and you tend to go back to your old racket. It happens, depending on sponsorships and your situation, but we've seen it many times through the years. Maybe this will happen to Carabelli, maybe not. But he is with a Percept 97D for now. So interesting to follow that story and see how it affects his results. That's always the most exciting part. I've gotten a lot of questions about Leonard Tien's racket. I don't know for sure what he plays. I was informed that he plays like an Ultra Tour 98, the Japan-only model that is now also available in Europe, at least parts of Europe so far. The retail model of that racket is 1819 pattern, like similar to what Medvedev uses. There is also a Pro Stock version in 1619. So when a pro usually gets asked to switch rackets, they have different choices to make. They can say, hey, I want like a denser pattern, like maybe they have 2 options, 1619, 1820. Maybe they can even make a custom pattern, a 1620. And then it comes down to like flex. How much flex do you want? Do you want like a stiff layup where the ball has less dwell time and shoots out quicker? Or you want a more flexible one where the ball stays longer on the strings? Usually they have different options in terms of the layup as well. So there's a lot of testing going on and a lot of pros getting different samples from different manufacturers and trying them and considering. It's tough to make up your mind on what racket works. Maybe you are in the racket jungle still, and many of us are, and it's a tough place. You want to get out of there as quickly as possible. You want to choose your racket, you want to choose your string, customization, whatever, and just work on your game. Because when you get into matches and your muscle memory is not completely tuned into the racket, that's when weird things can happen, and you can start blaming the racket when it's maybe you. Many of us have been down that road. We know how it feels. It's not the best feeling when you're completely confused about what racket you play, so better to make up your mind. Sometimes even if it's maybe not the best decision, but at least it's a decision and you don't worry too much about the rackets anymore. So if you have any information about learning Tien's racket, let me know in the comments. I mean, he's obviously been one of the most improved players. A lot of guys are making moves, but Tien is definitely been one of the rising stars on the tour, as you could see at those Australian Open. Last episode, we talked about Tiafoe's very light racket, that players like Bublik, Tiafoe are playing light. It's light swing weights, light weights, maybe more balance towards the head. And it's a little bit of a trend with the balance thing, like that players are more open to going more with the balance towards the head again. It depends completely on you because it's a feel thing, like where the balance of the racket, how the racket balances, is a very strong personal preference. But you can obviously adjust to changes, but that's usually where the players adjust the least. They might be willing to go down in swing weight or even go up in swing weight, how heavy the racket swings through the air. They might consider going down in weight or up in weight. But the balance point is usually where they are not so happy to change because that's so connected to how the racket swings and feels in that sense. Still very personal. You know, Roger played very heavy, but very headlight, meaning more weight in the handle. I might get a rackets to show you. So here we have the Pro Staff 97, the classic edition, and it's obviously a quite headlight racket. So when you balance it, this is with an overgrip, of course you're seeing that it's more prone to balancing towards the handle by quite a bit. If it was even balance, which is 34 centimeters, it would be more like this. And if you had more weight in the head, it would be like this. So what's happening now, the trend is because you're playing lighter with the evolving game of tennis, more and more weight are being moved here. More players are playing quite light, but if the weight is in the hoop, at least what contacts the ball is beefy enough to deal with the ball. So we're seeing balance points shift more towards here, which means increasing the balance. You might know that if you have an unstrung balance, so you remove these strings, a 31.5 centimeter usually adds 1 centimeter when you add the string. A little bit more if you have a thicker string. Just good to know. I don't think balance is as important as swing weight, but it's an important thing to talk about. I will try to touch on these topics in future videos as well, talking about pro player rackets, but also rackets in general. But that's what we've seen. We've seen Sinner's racket like 302 grams. This is from memory, 32.3 centimeter balance, and 296 swing weight unstrung. So it's a very light racket, but thanks to the balance being more towards the head, the swing weight being stable enough, although relatively light by pro player standards, he still gets something on the ball. Obviously, his technique is quite unique, I would say, with that hip slap that he plays with. But it's fascinating to see maybe more players move towards having less weight in the handle. Guys like Shapovalov, one-hand and backhand players overall, they like to have a bit more weight towards the handle usually to be able to maneuver the racket with just one hand. When you have two hands, of course, it's easier. You have a little bit more stability, you have a little bit more strength to swing the racket. But with one hand, you would like a little bit more weight in the handle. Usually, we're not all the same. There might be examples of completely opposite, but that's what I've seen when you look at like the top 100 specs as an example. So one-handed backhand players want a little bit more weight in the handle overall, but they can handle a bit of a heavier racket when the weight is more in the hand. So balance is counted in like centimeters on a scale, or in many cases in the States, you have like the head light or the head heavy. Head light, more weight in the handle. Head heavy, more weight in the hoop. Even balance, weight distributed near the center like this. Obviously, this is not the only metric that matters. You can have two rackets that are the same balance, and then they have different weight, different swing weight, different beam, different stiffness, so many things that matter in a racket specification. How you can say that the balance has overall shifted over the years is that they all used to play really heavy, used to play quite flexible rackets. People liked it for control and feel. And they used to be very head light. So when you have a lot of weight on the rackets, you obviously want the weight to be more towards the handle. Otherwise, this is going to be too heavy to actually maneuver. Moya, who used to have this kind of balance on his racket, he put so much weight at the 12 o'clock, he played very, very light specs so that he could actually swing it. Swing weight was super high, but overall the racket as such, when you held it, was quite light. You might remember the Wilson Hammer series. That was really the idea behind the hammer, that you focus on the weight towards the hoop, and then it's quite light in the handle. Some players will like it, some players won't. But on a scientific level, having more weight in the hoop makes a lot of sense because this is what impacts the ball. Some would argue, I've talked to some famous customizers as well, that would argue that having handle weight or lots of it, it can be called a bit of dead weight. It doesn't really do much in the handle, and I do tend to agree, although the balance point is obviously very personal. But this is one thing you can play around with. You shouldn't. You should probably play with the racket you know already and not think about specs at all, but when we're in this discussion anyway. But we've seen this change again towards the Wilson Hammer spec, probably because of slower courts. The balls are heavier for sure. I am testing a bunch of balls now to kind of confirm my opinions. Often when I open a new can of balls, even if it's a brand I'm familiar with, a model I'm familiar with, I have a new experience because it's like the quality control from one can to the other is pretty poor. So beware of that. Like sometimes one can plays different from another, even if it's the same brand. So we're in a tough situation with tennis balls. Heavier balls, more baseline focused rallies. Back in the day, people used to come to the net and be a lot more serve and volley oriented. This is rare, although some players obviously still try to head to the net, but it's not a lot of serve and volley for sure. More extreme grips than before, more Western, more semi-Western. Most players seem to use semi-Western. Before it was more like Eastern forehand grips like Roger. And you control the ball with spin. So it's all about like the racket head speed and the spin. You see the same in golf, which I follow a bit as well. Is that like it's a lot about like how fast you swing and like the ball speed and the ball spin, and they use these trackers. So it's lighter frames, thicker beams, stiffer constructions, more weight towards the hoop. Overall, small trends maybe, but they are there anyway. Still, I would say that balance without swing weight is just a number. To tell the whole story of a racket, you would like the swing weight to be there. You would like the weight. All these metrics matter. But it's interesting to consider balance because it's such a personal thing. I've seen the average balance to be around 32.6 strong, 32.6 centimeters. That's around 5-6 points headlight, which is giving you some whip, still some stability, still some power. I think that's popular for a reason. Quite easy to play, not too extreme in either way. So 32.5 or 6 around there centimeter balance is the average on the top 100. Let me know what you think about balance. Let me know what specs you play. If you have any questions, maybe to talk about in a future Q&A, could be interesting. But I wanted to touch upon this because it's one of the key specs when we start talking about pros and so on. Have a nice day now, and don't forget to play some tennis.